Good morning, my dear friends. My name is G. Ritwik. I am from CSCC section. My ID number is 219518005G2. Today I am going to say Python programming. My topic is my topic is Alexa Python development. In this we are going to see smart home speakers were a novel idea just a couple of years ago. Today they have become a central part of many people's homes and office, and their adoption is only expected to grow. Among the most popular of these devices are those controlled by Amazon Alexa. In this tutorial, you will become an Alexa Python developer by developing your own skill, an application that users will interact with the using voice commands to Amazon Alexa devices. In this, we are going to see what the main components of an Alexa skill are, how to set up an Alexa skill and create intents, what the ASK SDK core Alexa Python package is, how to use ASK SDK core to create this business logic of your Alexa Python skill, how to build, deploy, and test your Alexa Python skill using the online developer console. Getting started with Alexa Python development. Click the Get Started button. Click the Sign Up button on the subsequent page. Click Create your account, Amazon account. Fill out the form with the required details. Click Submit to complete the sign process. An Alexa Python developer must be familiar with a number of different Alexa skill components, but the two most important components, the interface and the service. The skill interface process that user speech inputs and maps it to an intent. The skill service contains all the business logic that determines the response for a given user input and returns it as a JSON object. The skill interface will be the front end of your Alexa skill. This is where you will define the intents and the innovation phrases that will perform a certain function. Essentially, this is the part of the skill that responsible for interacting with the users. The skill services will be backend of your Alexa skill. When a specific intent is triggered by the user, it will send that information as a request to the skill service. This will contain the business logic to be returned along with valuable information to the front end, which will finally be relayed back to the user. It's time to start building your first Alexa Python skill. Sign into the Alexa Developer Console and click on the Create Skill button to get started. On the next page, enter the skill name, which will be JokeBot. Like this, we can create a new skill. Skill name JokeBot, default language as English. Create the skill. This will be the innovation phrase of your skill. It's the phrase a user will speak to start using your Alexa skill. You can change this to something else later on if you like. Also note the Alexa skills can interact in many languages, which you can see from the default language drop down menu. For now, just set it to the English US. Next, you will need to choose a model to add to your skill. These models are likely templates that have been pre-designed by the Amazon team to help you get started with Alexa Python development. Based on some common use cases for this tutorial, you should interact, you should select the custom model. Finally, you need to select a method to host the backend of your Alexa skill. This service will contain the business logic of your application. For now, select Alexa hosted Python as the backend for your Alexa skill. This will automatically provide you with a hosted backend with in the AWS free tier, so you don't have to pay anything upfront or set up a complicated backend right now. Finally, click the Create Skill button to proceed. You might be asked to fill out a CAPTCHA here, so complete that as well. After a minute or so, you should be redirected to the build section of the developer console. Once you have logged into the Alexa developer console and selected or created a skill, you will greeted with the build section. This section this section provides you with a lot of options and controls to set up the interaction model of the skill. The components of this interaction model allow you to define how the users will interact with your skill. These properties can be accessed through the left side panel, which looks something like this. Alexa developer console. This is the Alexa developer console. Here we can see your skills, jobbot, build. We can see that innovation, intents, slot types, JSON editor. As an Alexa Python developer, there are few components of an Alexa skill interaction model that you will need to know about. The first is the innovation. This is what users will say to begin interacting with your Alexa skill. For example, the user will say jokebot to innovate the Alexa skill. You will build in the tutorial. You can change this from the innovation section at any time. Another components is the intent, which represents the core functionality of your application. Your app will have a set of intents that will represent the what kinds of interactions your skill can perform to provide contextual information for a given intent. You will use a slot, which is a variable in your utterance phrase. Consider the following example: a sample utterance to invoke the weather intent could be, tell me about the weather. To make the skill more useful, you can set the intent to be, tell me about the weather in Chicago, where the word Chicago will be passed as a slot variable, which improves the user experience. Lastly, there are slot types which define how data is in a slot is handled and recognized. For example, the Amazon date slot type easily converts words that indicate a date like today, tomorrow, and others into a standard date form such as 2022 first. At, at this point, the intents panel should be open. If it's not, then you can open it by selecting intents from the sidebar. On the left, you will notice that there are 5 intents already set up by default like this. Amazon Developer Console. Intents, there are 5 intents. Hello world intent, build 8 intents, Amazon cancel intent, Amazon help intent, Amazon stop intent, Amazon navigate home intent. There are the 5 intents, and there are slot types and JSON editor. The intents panel includes hello world intent and 5 built-in intents. The built-in intents are there to remind you to account for some common cases that are important to making a user-friendly bot. Here is a brief overview. Amazon cancel intent. Lets the user cancel a transaction or task. Examples include never mind, forgot it, exit, and cancel, though there are others. Next, Amazon Help Intent provides help about how to use the skill. This could be used to return a sentence that serves as a manual for the user on how to interact with your skill. Next, Amazon Stop Intent allows the user to exit the skill. Next, Amazon Navigate Home Intent navigates the user to the device home screen if a screen is being used and ends the skill section. Later in the tutorial, you will learn how to make a new intent, but for now, it's good idea to take a look at some existing intents that are part of every new skill you create. To start, click the Hello World intent to see its properties. Hello World intent properties. Hello, how are you? Say hi world. Say hi, hi. You can see the sample utterances that a user can speak to invoke this intent. When this intent is invoked, this information is sent to the backend service of your Amazon Alexa skill, which will then execute the required business logic and return a response. Below this, you have the option to set up a delegation strategy, which allows you to delegate a specific dialogue that you define to a particular intent. Next, you have the option to define slots for some particular data that your intent is supposed to collect. For example, if you were to create an intent that tells the weather for a given day, then you have a date slot here that you'll collect the date information and send it to your backend services. Whenever you make changes to an intent, you need to click the Save Model button to save it. Then you can click the Build Model button to go ahead and test your Alexa Python skill. It's helpful to know that the interaction model of a skill can be completely represented in a JSON format. To see the current structure of your Alexa skill, click the JSON editor option from the left side panel of the console. You can see here JSON editor. There is a program which we can see interaction model, language model, innovation, name, temperature skill, intents, Amazon cancel instant, Amazon help intent, Amazon stop intent, hello world intent. Samples, hello, how are you? Say hi world, say hi, hi, say hello world, say name Amazon navigate, home intent, samples, types. If you make a change directly using the JSON editor, then the changes are also reflected in the developer console UI. To test this behavior, add a new intent and click Save Model. Once you have made all the necessary changes to the interaction model of your skill, you can open the test section of the developer console to test out your skill. Testing is an important part of becoming an Alexa Python developer. So be sure not to skip this step. Click the test button for the top navigation bar on the developer console. By default, testing will be disabled from the drop-down menu. Select development to start testing. You can see a test icon there. Development and option is there. Here you have a number of ways that you can test out your Alexa Python skill. Let's do a quick test so that you can get an idea of how your Alexa skill will respond to a utterance. Select the Alexa simulator option from the left side panel. Then enter the phrase, "Hey Alexa, open Jackbot." You can do this either by typing it in the input box or by using the mic option. After a couple of seconds, a response will be returned back to you. You can see here. The program we have set here in JSON input and JSON output. Here's what happened so far. The JSON input object was constructed from the input data that the user entered through voice or text. The Alexa simulator packaged up the input along with other relevant metadata and sent it to the backend service. You can see this is the JSON input box. The backend service received the input JSON object and passed it to check the type of the request. Then it passed the JSON to the relevant intent handler function. The intent handler function processed the input and gathered the required response, which is sent back as a JSON response to the Alexa simulator. You can see this in the JSON output box. The Alexa simulator pairs this JSON and read the speech response back to you. Creating new intents. Let's start by creating the joke intent, which will return a random joke from a list or to the user. Open the build section of your Alexa developer console. Then click the add button next to the intents option from the left side panel. You can see here. Add intent. An intent represents an action that fulfills a user spoken request. Create custom intent, joke intent. Next, you need to add sample utterances as that the user will speak to invoke this intent. These can be phrases like tell me a joke or I want to hear a joke. Type in a phrase and click the plus sign to add it as a sample utterance. Here is what that should look like. Here is an joke intent, sample utterances 2. I want to hear a joke or tell me a joke. You can add more sample utterances, but for now, this will do just fine. Lastly, click the Save Model button in the top left corner of the window to save these changes. Remember, you will need to build your model before you can test it out. Click the Build Model button to rebuild the interaction model of your Alexa Python skill. You will see a progress notification on the bottom right of your browser window. Once the build process is successful, you should see another pop-up notification indicating the status of the build process. You can check to see if the joke intent is successful triggered or not. Click the evaluate model button in the top right corner of the developer console. A small window will pop in from the side, allowing you to check that what intent will be triggered by a given input utterances. Type in type in any of the sample utterances to make sure that the joke intent is being invoked successfully. Here you can see it. Joke intent. Joke intent, you can see it. Building the skill backend. Now that you have an intent created that can be triggered by the user, you need to add functionality in the skill backend to handle this intent and return useful information. Open the code section of the Alexa developer console to get started. When you open the code section of the developer console, you can see an online code editor with some files already set up for you get started. In particular, you will see the following 3 files in the Lambda subdirectory, Lambda function Python. This is the main entry point of the backend service. All the request data from the Alexa intent is received by here and is supposed to be written from this file only. Requirements text. This file contains the list of Python packages that are being used in the project. This is especially useful if you are choosing to set up your own backend service instead of using what's provided by Amazon. Utilities payload. This file contains some utility function required for the Lambda function to interact with an Amazon S3 services. It contains some sample code on how to fetch data from on Amazon S3 bucket, which you might find useful later on. Right now, this file is nothing being used in Lambda function py. This is the code where we see import logging, import ASK SDK core utilities, ask as ASK utilities. Same, we have to copy and paste in the code editor. First, you import the necessary utilities that were provided in the ASK SDK code Alexa Python package. Then there are three main tasks you need to perform in Lambda function py to handle a, to handle a request from an intent received from the front end of the Alexa skill. Create an intent handler class which inherits from the abstract request handler class with functions can handle and handle. There are already a couple of handlers classes defined in Lambda function py, such as launch request handler, help intent handler, and so on. This handle the fundamental intents of an Alexa skill. An important point to note here it is that you need to create an new intent handler class for each of the intents you define. Create a skill builder object which acts as the entry point of for your Alexa Python skill. This routes all the incoming request and response payloads to the intent handlers that you defined. Pass the intent handler class as an argument to add request handlers so that they are called in order whenever a new request is received. The skill builder is a singleton, so only one instance of it is needed to handle the routing of all incoming requests. This is a good time for you to go through Lambda function py. You will notice that the same pattern is followed over and over again to handle different intents that can be triggered by your Alexa Python skills. Thank you for giving this opportunity to do this